So welcome, everybody. I am Dr. Ted Barnett, President and founder of Rochester Lifestyle Medicine Institute. Some people know me as the high-tech doctor with low-tech solutions, or Dr. Veggie. And I'm just very excited tonight to be able to talk about a really wonderful documentary and with the producer, Nelson Campbell, and the founder of Plant Pure Communities. And I'm really looking forward to being able to talk to him more about his organization and the video itself. So, but first I want to give a little introduction to what we're up to tonight, and then also about RLMI. So we're spending the first 5 minutes doing this introduction. Then we're going to run the trailer to the From Food to Freedom documentary, and then we're going to just have a discussion with Nelson, and we're going to break up around 8:30. These are some facilitated programs that we run. You can look at our website, rocklifemed.org, to see when they start. We're very proud of the one in the middle. That's the 15-day whole food plant-based jumpstart, which we developed ourselves, which we consider to be the prescription for chronic disease. We've had over 2,000 people go through the monthly program from at least 44 states, and last time I checked, it was 9 countries. But those are some information sessions that you can send your friends to, or you can come to. And then we also run the LIFT project in conjunction with Darren Morton in Australia, and we are now the preferred provider for facilitated LIFT programs around the world. We also run Pivio, which used to be the Complete Health Improvement Program, and we'll be announcing our upcoming ones in the future. Let me just tell you about our guest lecturer tonight, Nelson Campbell. He wrote and directed the 2015 documentary film Plant Pure Nation, and founded the nonprofit organization Plant Pure Communities in early 2016. Released in theaters in over 100 cities, Plant Pure Nation examines the political and economic factors that suppress information about the benefits of plant-based nutrition, and makes connections to public policy, medical practice, food deserts, and farming. As the president of PPC, Nelson continues to drive the strategic direction of the organization. His vision includes grassroots strategies for empowering people in local communities to share the plant-based nutrition message, including in our many under-resourced communities, and for addressing climate change and other environmental problems through a change in our food choices. Nelson also founded the Plant Pure Inc. food business, which supports PPC's mission with its commitment to provide food products into under-resourced communities through non-retail channels at discounted prices. Prior to his involvement with Plant Pure Nation, Nelson worked for 25 years as a socially conscious business entrepreneur. He graduated from Cornell University with a bachelor's degree in political science and a master's degree in economics. Welcome, Nelson Campbell. It's so great to have you here.
It's good to be here. Thank you for inviting me, Ted.
Absolutely. What we're going to do is we're going to run the trailer of your latest film, From Food to Freedom, and then we're going to have a discussion with the people in the audience. How does that sound?
Sounds good to me. So
okay,
these discussions are always interesting. So I would just tell people, if you have a question, don't be shy. You never know what will come out of my mouth.
Okay, now I'm getting shy.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So, Bob, you want to cue up that video, please?
The research is alarming. More than 500,000 of our children will have diabetes by the year 2060.
On the market since 2017, the FDA-approved drug for managing type 2 diabetes is soaring to newfound fame.
We're ignoring the thing that really matters. It's extremely important that we finally get to know what we have not known.
Hey.
Thank you for coming here. It's a big commitment.
This is a continuous glucose monitor that you've now applied to the back of your upper arm.
We're taking people who are eating the standard American diet, and we're feeding them foods that kind of feel a little familiar to them.
I would like to feel better, I'd like to feel happier, and I want her to be proud of me.
Rome wasn't built in a day. First thing they said, they make it feel like your insulin's going to take care of things, and they just keep increasing your doses.
And because of the cost of insulin, there were times that I went to a food pantry.
The burden of chronic disease, it can be quite severe.
I don't have time to get sick because I'm trying to take care of everybody else.
So your lab results show.
Wow. Wow.
Our time is a time that is ripe for revolution.
The sad thing is, a lot of people, we don't know we're in bondage.
Freedom is being free of the pharmaceutical companies controlling my life.
And when you make that decision, you gain freedom. You know what? I feel like that's a good ending.
Wow, fantastic. I get excited every time I see that. Now we're going to introduce Dr. Susan Friedman, who's our Director of Clinical Studies. So Susan, if you want to make yourself visible, there you are. So Susan's going to help field the questions, but I actually have a question for Nelson to just get things started. So you grew up in a pretty interesting family, I would say very intellectual. You got to travel a lot. And what about your background has led you to become an activist?
You know, I think it's really the values that I learned growing up in our family. I think it's just an interest in the world and an interest in wanting to do the right thing and having the courage to try to make change. You know, these are all things that I learned at home, and I oftentimes don't do those things very well as I could. You know, we're all very imperfect, but I do my best. I would say it's really rooted in my values, and the things I've learned along the way, of course, have fed into that.
You used the word, actually, it's interesting. I'm just going to follow up. You used the word, the courage to work to make change. Does it take courage to do that?
It does. And, you know, we have walked a very difficult path. My background has been in business, and I know that, you know, if you're just trying to make a successful business, and I know this well, you pick one thing and you focus on that one thing, and you do it really well. It could be a single product. I mean, people have built whole companies around a burger or mayonnaise or a specific technology. And that's what you do. But I went into this wanting to do more than that. You know, I wanted to try to launch a strategy that would organize people and kind of empower people with this health message and to help empower people to share this with others. And so this strategy we had a lot of different elements. It's had a nonprofit element, it's had a business element, it's had a philanthropic element, a grassroots organizing element. So we've been working on all of these things and also at the same time trying to have the financial resources to be able to do these things. And so it's been very difficult. This has been far more difficult than I ever imagined. And, you know, I think to do something like that, it's harder than just doing something comfortable.
Right.
Sometimes, a lot of times when I can't sleep at night, I'll lay there and I'll think to myself, you know, I should be more comfortable. So why am I doing this? So yeah, it does take, there is a sacrifice involved, and it does take courage to do that. But you know, the benefit, and this is in a way it's self-serving depending on how you define the self. I think a lot of us are confused as to what the self is, but it's kind of self-serving in that ultimately you get more than you give. You know, you meet great people along the way, and you learn. When you live on the edge and you're doing interesting things, you learn, and you learn because you make a lot of mistakes. You know, you're always falling down, and you have to pick yourself back up, and you learn, you gain knowledge, and you meet people, and at the end of the day, you look back, and even if you didn't do all that you wanted to do, you feel like, you know, I made good use of my time. So.
Yeah, no, thanks for that. I think Susan and I can both relate to that because we've been working on Rochester Lifestyle Medicine Institute since 2015. And we've had a lot of mistakes to learn from.
Yeah.
And yes, and many different, you know, trying to do many different things at the same time. So yeah, definitely can.
Yeah.
I think, you know, if you wouldn't mind, just for if there are any people who are listening who aren't that familiar with plant pure communities, could you just talk a little bit about what the organization does, how it evolved, and kind of what your vision was to start with, and yeah, just a little bit of that.
Well, we actually have two organizations which we launched on the heels of our first film, Plant Pure Nation. And I spent time working on that film because I was wanting to create a platform that we could stand on to launch these two organizations. One is Plant Pure, which is this foods business. And my interest there was twofold. One is I wanted to start a company that could create a financial return that we could use in part to fund some of the philanthropic elements of our strategy. The other thing that I've always wanted to do, and this has been a real struggle, as you alluded to, Ted, when you were introducing me, is I've always had this dream of producing healthy, low-cost food products, plant-based food products that we could take into under-resourced communities. And what I've wanted to do is to be able to do that, waiving our profit margin and shipping food in bulk through community partners. That's always been a big part of the dream. And we have done some work through our nonprofit in these communities. I haven't been able to scale this concept as I've wanted, though, because we're still working to make this business successful. And actually, we were poised for success right before the pandemic, but then when the shutdowns happened, we lost a lot of newly won business, and it just really set us back. The other organization is Plant Pure Communities, which is what you referred to in your question. That's a nonprofit. And we formed Plant Pure Communities in order to support our pod network. At the end of our film, Plant Pure Nation, if you've seen it, we have a call to action for people to join or start these local groups, support and advocacy groups, and we call them pods because planting seeds of change in local communities. And that really took off. At its height, we were engaging about 250,000 people. We took a hit during the pandemic, but then after the pandemic, it started to come back. And in addition to that, we have also engaged in some media, because media can be very powerful as a way of inspiring people to join with you. And so that's where the film From Food to Freedom came from. It was produced through the nonprofit. I should note as well that just recently we reached agreement to transfer the pod network over to the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine. We have announced this to our pod leaders. We haven't announced this to the community at large because PCRM wanted us to hold back because they're taking this time to build a new website. This will be a standalone website dedicated solely to the pod network. They're pouring all their resources into this, and this is, in part why I did this, because they have such a strong resource base. Yeah. And I wanted to create some bandwidth to do more media. But anyways, later this fall, PCRM will be making a major announcement, and they'll begin, publicly promoting the pod network. So we expect to see rapid growth there.
That's great. Wow, that's really exciting. Yeah. Good for you. That's fantastic. Susan, what else do we have here on our list of questions?
One of the first questions was about kind of dietary patterns that, there's so much discussion about Mediterranean diet as the go-to healthy diet. And what are your thoughts about kind of why that is, and how we maybe get the message out more about plant-based diets?
So, I've heard a lot of times when I get questions like this, I'll just reflect back what I've heard my father say. I've had the good fortune of spending hours and hours and hours with him and attending many of his lectures. So I think sometimes I know exactly what he would say. He knows and knew a lot of the researchers who were involved in that study, the Mediterranean, the studies on the Mediterranean diet. And as most people know, it's mostly a plant-based diet, but it does include a bit of animal products, particularly fish, maybe some cheese now and then, a little dairy, and also olive oil, plenty of olive oil. So when those study results came out showing better health outcomes in those areas around the Mediterranean, the olive oil industry jumped on it because they said that, oh, it must be due to the olive oil. And in fact, that's not true at all. In fact, according to my dad, if you were to go look at other rural traditional societies that weren't consuming oil, they had even better health outcomes than those Mediterranean regions. So it wasn't the oil, certainly wasn't the little bit of animal products they were consuming. It was the plants. You know, they were eating a mostly plant-based diet. But it's good that we were hearing, you know, more about this, and they can call it a Mediterranean diet. I guess it's a step in the right direction.
Let's go back and talk about Plant Pure Nation, which came out in 2015. That's almost 10 years ago now. What do you think about what kind of impact do you think that film had?
Well, you know, Netflix and Amazon, they don't share their data, but based on our best estimates, and you know, also taking into account the 2 million plus views on YouTube, and we have actually two official releases on YouTube. We estimate that at least 8 to 10 million people have seen it, maybe more. So it could be over 10 million. And I've talked to a lot of people through the years who saw the film, who made the change because of the film, which makes me feel good, because that's why we made the film, was to reach people. And in particular, we wanted to be able to answer the question that people new to this idea always have, which is, if this is such a miraculous thing, how come I never heard of this before? Even today, you hear more discussion of a plant-based diet, but still most people have no clue as to how powerful this is. So I wanted to be able to answer that question, and I wanted to use story to do it. And you know, as the film showed, we had a big legislative failure in Kentucky, but like you oftentimes do when you're an entrepreneur, you figure out how to take a negative and turn it into a positive. And so I started imagining a storyline from that failure that we could drive, taking us through North Carolina and back to Kentucky, that would help to answer that question that people asked: how come I never heard this before? So
really interesting. Actually, so in that documentary, as I recall, your jumpstart was 5 days, wasn't it? Or was it?
We actually did 10 days.
It was 10 days.
For 10 days.
Okay, that's right. Okay. So we have to give you credit for starting our own 15-day whole food plant-based jumpstart. That's right. It was 10 days, because your brother, Tom, actually ran a jumpstart at the local JCC in Rochester. Must have been 2016, 2017 when he did it, because then that's when we got the idea to create our own jumpstart that would be a replacement for, or something in addition to the CHIP program that we were running at the time. So yeah, so thank you for that.
Yeah, well, you're doing some good work up there, Ted, and so my hats off to you, and keep that up.
Oh, thank you.
We started working on this back in, I think, around 2010. We started working on a meal plan that we could produce locally at a local kitchen. And at that time, we did a 2-week jumpstart. And we started doing this several times in the local community. And when we first did it, we were astounded at the results we got. And I remember sharing them with my father, and he was astounded. I mean, you know, he understood the power of the diet, but no one had really done this before in the way that we did it. And so to see those results, it was really mind-blowing. And that's really what fed into the idea of Plant Pure Nation. You know, I had this idea that we would do this in a small rural town in North Carolina. And if you saw the film, you'll know that I had a hard time recruiting the first, I think it was 12 people. We had to go up and down the main street there in town, and different shopkeepers and other people begging people to do this because no one knew anything about plant-based nutrition. They hadn't heard of my father. And we did that, and we got those results. And so they went out and started talking to other people in town, and we did it again. But this time we had like 20 some people, and then again, and then we had 50 people, and then 100 people, and then 135. So we showed how it could go viral in a community like that.
Right. And I think what you taught us was how quickly those results could come in. That was what's so amazing, right? As a physician, we were never taught that you should get labs 2 weeks apart.
Yeah. And I think, we were all amazed, Ted. But the one thing that I've always wanted to do is to do this in a highly controlled setting, utilizing everything that we had learned. Because we had done these jump starts where we would go out and we would prepare the food for people for 10 days and educate them and do the pre and post biometrics. We did this numerous times in North Carolina, mainly in the rural communities there. Then we went to Louisiana, did one in Southwest Louisiana in the Cajun community next to a big swamp. And then we went up and did one in a rural Amish community in northern Indiana. And then we did a number of jump starts with our partner in New York in the Dominican community up in Washington Heights. We always had good results, but as you know, Ted, in doing this yourself, there's always the big issue of compliance. Are people going home and doing what you asked them to do? So I had always wanted to do this in a highly controlled setting, and that was the basis for the next film, From Food to Freedom.
Right. Okay, that makes sense. So Susan, looks like you had another question there.
Well, yeah, just, one of the things that really struck me about the film was kind of these sort of dueling ideas of sort of personal responsibility and also, what are we doing as a society? And how do we, there's so many questions about sort of the interaction between the two. I think a lot of several of the participants talked about sort of feeling like they were being failed by the pharmaceutical industry. And I was wondering if you could kind of talk a little bit about those two different concepts. How do we empower both potentially, and how do the two interact?
Wow. that may be the best question I've ever had on the film right there. That's not an exaggeration. I put tremendous thought into that. And those ideas came out in the film in a very purposeful, intended way. I've had a long-standing interest in politics and economics. When I was younger, at one point, I thought I was going to be a politician, and then I started to become one when I ran a congressional campaign and decided I didn't want to do that. But at any rate, I think we need to transcend some of the partisan division that we have today. When I look out at the world and I see different points of view, I see little splinters of truth everywhere. And so I'm always trying to kind of be humble and let go of my attached ideas and my ego and just see things, to see if I can find these splinters of truth and kind of fashion them into something more transcendent. And that's what I was trying to do here. So, the term this idea that people need to take personal responsibility, that's a concept that people oftentimes associate with more right-leaning viewpoints. You hear a lot about that, right? But there's another really important idea, which is that our environment matters, right? If you're born into a more challenging situation, you can't just be expected to make all the right decisions and take personal responsibility. So there's a social and societal side to this as well. And you tend to hear those ideas more on the left-leaning side of things, right? But you know what? Those ideas are actually very much connected, and we can connect them into a more transcendent idea. Personal responsibility is, in fact, the pathway to freedom. You know, we have certain rights guaranteed to us under our Constitution, but we can't really be truly free until we make that decision to take control of our lives so that we can control our futures and live the kind of lives that we want. And that's what personal responsibility is taking that step to take charge of our lives. And of course, to do that, though, you know, we need to have a lot of things to do that. We need to have what I spoke about at the beginning of the show. You know, we need to sort of have the right value system. We need to have the right information. We need education. We need help. We need peer support. Sometimes we need community support. You know, if we're talking about plant-based nutrition, we need access to affordable foods. There's a lot that goes into that that's societal. And so you really have to meld these two things together. This idea that personal responsibility is important. It's what we teach our kids, right? So we all think that's important. But we have to take that idea and recognize, though, that sometimes people have difficulty doing that. So then we have to also take a more societal approach. And that's the message I was trying to convey in the film.
Yeah. I mean, I think it did definitely came through. So, yeah.
Yeah. But you have a philosopher's mind.
Oh, thanks. Well, you know, maybe it depends. You know, I used to go to in college. I'd go to some philosophy classes. I didn't know what they were talking about. If you just talk about abstract ideas in philosophy, sometimes it can be confusing and not so. But
yeah, you know, it's interesting. Kind of the follow up what Susan was talking about. So, you know, Dan Buettner's come out with a new book, the blues about the blue zones, and I guess there's a new Blue Zone series on Netflix, and that makes talks about the importance of community. So again, that's kind of addressing what Susan was talking about, the community versus personal. So
you need both. You need community, you need loving support of others, and the education, all of that. But you also need to, at some point in your life, say, okay, I'm going to take charge. You know, I'm responsible for my life.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
So, you know, I thought it was really wonderful that you didn't end the movie with the end of the intervention. You know, you followed them, you followed the participants up and to see how they were doing afterwards. And, you know, certainly a few of them were struggling. And what do you see? Because you know, that's something that we think about a lot with the Jumpstart program also, is how do you, well, first of all, what do you see as kind of the major barriers to continuing on the road? Because at the end of the program, they all felt like, you know, they were feeling so much better. They were really excited about, you know, the health changes that they had made. And yet once they kind of got back into the real world, it was really a struggle for them. So, I mean, what do you see as kind of the main barriers that people face, and what can people do? What can we at RLMI, what can we as professionals do? What can we as society do to help people to kind of stay on that track once they do see the value of eating a plant-based diet?
Well, in our film, one half of the folks, 3 of the people, stayed completely on the diet, and the other 3 struggled. And so we were kind of batting 50%, which actually is pretty darn good.
Yeah, that's very good.
You know, based on our past experience. But I did want to show those results 6 months later, because it allowed me to make this point, this kind of dual-edged point. I could show how when people take responsibility, how they feel invigorated and freer in their lives. But I also was able to show the obstacles that people face to being able to do that, which is why we have to take a societal approach as well. In the case, in the three people who struggled actually touch on some of the key points that key answers I would give to that question. First of all, Joyce, what a wonderful person, just a beautiful soul. But Joyce, who has taken responsibility to care for her family members and do so many good things, she struggled because she was under a lot of stress from having to care for others. So she was under a lot of stress, and she also unfortunately had a spouse who wasn't supportive. So, she did the shopping and the cooking at home.
Yeah.
So she had to, do 2 meals essentially. And between that and the stress, it just got overwhelming for her, and it would have gotten overwhelming for me too.
Mm-hmm.
Rebecca, she struggled as well. And again, her story was a story about stress, but more for financial reasons and certain other issues as well. But she was just lived a very stressful existence. And she also lacked social support. She didn't have a network of peers supporting her. So she was all alone and kind of also just lost in stress. Paul and Leanne Dumaduk, they also struggled. They live in Iowa, which is very much an animal products area, and there were just no real good food options in their community. And that's important, food options. So, all those stories touch on key things that are really important. You have to have access to food. It needs to be convenient, healthy, affordable. If you live a life of stress, filled with stress, the last thing you want to do is change your lifestyle and make such a radical change and endure yet more stress. Even if there's something good on the other side, it's hard to see that when you're lost in stress. If you don't have the social support, the people around you, it makes it, whether it's your spouse or friends or your community, it's really hard. You need the social support. And then I would say there's something else that's important too. When we communicate this idea, we always need to do this with humility. And we always need to teach people that, look, if you fall off the wagon, it's okay. Don't beat up on yourself. Don't judge yourself. It's okay. Just focus on the next meal. Because I've seen this over and over again. People fall off the wagon and they beat themselves up and they think, okay, I can't do this. Gosh darn it, I just messed up. I can't do it. So I'm just going to quit. And, we need to teach people to forgive themselves and just try again, focus on the next meal.
Yeah, that's a great answer. I'm going to just jump in for a couple of things. People have been asking in the Q&A how they can watch the video, and you can watch it by going to plantpurecommunities.org. I tried typing that into the Q&A and it didn't show up. So it's plantpurecommunities.org, correct?
It is. And I should just to tell you a little history on the current status of the release. We did a limited release of the film in March with Food Revolution Network. And it was a 7-day release that they did all the promotion. They taped me saying some things. And so I said what I was asked to say, and they taped it, but they basically did it. And over 100,000 people signed up over 7 days to watch the film. And we could see in the analytics that most of them watched it.
Wow.
So we had tremendous reception, and we also, the film's won a number of awards, so it's been well received on the film festival circuit. But we are having difficulties now. We decided that we were going to do, for a limited period of time, a release that would generate some revenue for our nonprofit. But we had a real hard time getting it out there. Our payment processor wouldn't turn turn on the system that, their system for us.
Really?
And this went on and on and on. And there was no explanation for it. At one point, they said, well, we're going to kick this up to the highest levels of the company. It was really bizarre. And so finally, I told him, I said, look, if you don't fix this, I'm going to go public with all of our followers. And I'm going to tell them that you're blocking our film release. So the very next day, they turned it on and we were able to get the film live. We did that for a while. Then we decided to make it available for free. So we uploaded it to YouTube. But we had a real tussle there as well. They initially wouldn't make the film searchable. So we could upload it, but no one could find it.
Wow.
Kind of back and forth, finally got that resolved. But now, more recently, we're trying to promote it, and Food Revolution is trying to promote it as well. But Facebook is suppressing our posts of the film. And so right now, Food Revolution Network, they're going through the formal appeals process to try to get that lifted. But it's been a very frustrating experience because when we released Plant Pure Nation, we didn't have to worry about anything like that. I mean, we were just free to release it. So it's been a frustrating experience.
Yeah. What is the feedback that you get about why they're blocking it, or do they not give you any information?
Yeah, I mean, we don't know. It's really the trailer that's the problem. But we had an earlier version of the trailer where we referenced the pandemic, because in the film we make a connection of nutrition to COVID outcomes,
right? Which
of course is factual and science-based. But we took that out and we developed a different version of the trailer because we were afraid that, if we used the word pandemic or whatever, that somehow it would trigger a filter. So I have no idea why the current version of the trailer is not being, I can't imagine what filter it's tripped. I mean, we talk about diabetes and chronic disease and nutrition and people who are getting healthy. So your guess is as good as mine.
Mr. Campbell refers to his father. Who is his father? I want to know who this person is.
All right. All right. So my dad is Dr. T. Colin Campbell, and he was the scientist who did the pioneering research validating the health benefits of a plant-based diet. So he worked on this for decades, and he was a pioneer in his field. And he's the author of the China study with my brother Tom, who lives up there in your area in Rochester. And that became a best-selling book. He also was featured in Forks Over Knives, our film, and a number of other films.
I'll add to that a little bit. He's really a hero. And actually the term whole food plant-based was coined by Dr. T. Colin Campbell. It's a great term, and we're very appreciative of that. So Susan, what else do we see out there?
Yeah, there's a question about food swamps, places where there's just a lot of highly processed foods. And where do you see the biggest potential to change food swamps? Is it through political advocacy? Is it through trying to work with businesses voluntarily, or going to individuals, or some combination of the above?
Well, this is a complex issue. And this is one that, again, is near and dear to my heart. In fact, I told the story of my own grandmother in Plant Pure Nation. They were didn't have much money, didn't know anything about nutrition, and it really led to a pretty terrible outcome for her, and she wasn't served by the healthcare system. But a lot of people are experiencing this, and it starts with access to healthy, affordable foods. And that's, of course, what we want to do through our foods business, and we're still working on that. But, that in and of itself is a complex process, because, you can have the food and you can want to get it into the community, but you have to figure out how to get it there, who to distribute it through, and how to get the food there in the most affordable manner possible. One thing's for sure, I think there are very few people in our food industry today who are even thinking about that. And I don't understand it. If I were a billionaire, a food mogul, and I could make a line of healthy foods, I would distribute them in these communities, waiving the profit margin and working with community partners like churches and community-based organizations to get the food to the people who need it. But that's not enough. That's why this is a complex question, because there's also the educational piece and the informational piece. In fact, they've done studies, compelling studies, showing that in communities that have gotten kind of newfound access to healthy foods, because someone made an effort to do that, it hasn't always led to an increased consumption of those foods. Just having the foods there and on the shelf doesn't mean people are going to buy it and utilize it. You need to educate. Just, it's the same in every community, right? It could be a wealthy suburb, or it could be a community that's not so wealthy. It could be anywhere. Everyone needs to be educated. They need to understand why this food is healthy. And we really need to think about both. But one thing's for sure, these places, these communities are suffering the worst health statistics. And of course, suffering from many other things. And I feel like as a society, we've organized or ignored the plight of these communities. We spend billions of dollars on other things, but we don't give any thought to how to improve the lives of people living in these communities. And we spend a lot of time, by the way, virtue signaling, engaging in virtue signaling. That doesn't do anything to help anyone. We need to actually figure out, how are we going to redirect society's resources? How are we going to go deep and really figure out how to help the plight of people who are in some of these places, who have some of these really deep-rooted challenges.
So do you have any suggestions? I mean, other than, eating plant-based and talking to friends and colleagues about, the benefits of eating a plant-based diet, what are your thoughts about things that we can do as individuals and as groups to try to move things forward? What are the best levers to push to make a difference?
Well, the best leadership always is the leadership that comes through example. So, being the example of the change that you think needs to happen is very important. So many people have been opened up to this idea through the example of someone who went through it and became healthy. In fact, you can be a lot more compelling sometimes when you just focus on that rather than preaching at someone. That can actually turn people off. So be the example, and then really start local. Start with your own family, your friends, work site, your church, or faith, any other faith group, or whatever, wherever you are. But it's very important that, I think, when we try to share this message, that we don't preach it at people. We lead through example, but also we pay attention to those opportunities that might come up where we can say something, we can introduce a thought or an idea, plant a seed in a way that's not preachy, in a way that's not, too forceful. And so I think, starting there with the people we love and the people we're with. And if you want to go beyond that, I think doing things like joining a pod, joining with other like-minded people. You can find support, and maybe you can start to talk about strategies for your community. What could we do on a bigger scale to reach people that maybe you don't even know? And I think to change the world, we need to encourage more of that type of bottom-up connection and action.
Yeah, that's kind of the conclusion we've come to, is that the system itself is so frozen in place.
Yeah.
It's really, you really need to start from the bottom up, and then it'll just happen. And of course, we won't know who we won't, nobody will get credit because it will just be, oh, obvious, right?
And that's hey, you just said something there, Ted, that's so important. I think we need more of that attitude in our community. Let's not worry about getting credit for things.
Right.
Let's just think about how do we empower as many people as possible to be their own leaders, to help make this change. It's not about any one of us being an authority or any of us won't be, being the leader or getting credit for things.
Right.
It needs to be, we're all in this together and let's connect and work together to make this change.
Yeah, I think that's right. You talked about setting an example. So I always joke with people that, so we basically got really interested in becoming vegan back in around 1990 or so. And so it was obvious to me that from environmental reasons, we needed to make this switch, that the planet, that the world was going to move in that direction, but that somebody had to prove by raising kids that way. So I said, okay, this is going to be an experiment. So I tell people, like any good parents, my wife and I decided to perform an experiment on our children. In 1991, we became vegan. So, and now they're all grown up and it worked. So there's the example.
There you go. That's that's how it happens.
Someone's asking if we, how do we start a pod, or if we want to join a pod?
That's a good
There's someone from Eau Claire, Michigan.
Yeah. So if you go to our website now, plantpurecommunities.org, I think we still have that functionality up there where you can express interest in starting a pod, or you can write in. Right now, those expressions of interest are getting forwarded through to PCRM. We are in a little bit of an awkward phase. Things are kind of getting handed off from one organization to the other. So kind of working the kinks out. But pretty soon, PCRM is going to roll out with a new website, and it's going to be really polished, and the pathway for getting questions answered will be really clear, and you'll get a response. But I think if you write through our website now, that will get forwarded through to PCRM, and someone should get back in touch with you.
Someone posed the question about what about PBS for the film?
If they know someone at PBS, please let me know. Yeah, any ideas at all like that would be helpful. We also can probably get it placed on Amazon, maybe Netflix. But it's really, you can upload it to different platforms, but you have to have the ability to promote it. And so that's what we're trying to figure out now, without access to the social media that most people use, how do we promote this? So
somebody's asking about your wife, Kim, and will she be restarting her weekly cooking demos?
Yeah, I'm glad that that question came up. And I should have said something about this sooner, but she has been a partner with me on this journey from the beginning. In fact, she was pivotal in helping to create the meal plans that we used for our first jumpstarts or immersions. She also, with another chef friend of ours, did the food for the program that we featured in our film. And of course, as this person has referenced, she has done cooking shows in the past. We're currently kind of in a transition period, not just with respect to the pods, but other aspects of our lives and our work. In fact, I'm talking to you from the basement now of a house that we just bought. We just moved to in the western part of North Carolina, up in the mountains.
Nice.
Which has been a painful experience with the tree falling on our house the day before we got here. But anyways, she hopes that at some point she could restart that program or that cooking show. Right now, we really don't have the capability to do that.
Yeah, well, we look forward to that, and good luck getting moved into your new house. That's
it's hard enough as it is without a big tree
Right.
So it's a good time to fall in your house.
Right. It didn't block
no wind even blowing. It just fell over. So might have been the pharma industry.
Yeah, right. Exactly. That's it. There you go.
I don't know.
Yeah. So actually, speaking of the pharma industry, this it looks like everyone's talking about Ozempic these days, and it seems like that. You're talking about these under resourced communities. There always seems to be enough money to pay for expensive treatments like dialysis and that kind of thing. But the inexpensive things like food, we don't seem to be able to find them, the money for that, even though it would be much more powerful. So do you have any thoughts on that whole interaction between the food industry and the drug industry?
Unfortunately, so much of our food industry today are producing products that then create the future profits for the drug industry. So they're really kind of working together in a way. We're giving people food that makes them unhealthy, and then we're turning to pharmaceuticals to try to, quote, fix the problem. It's just a really tough thing I think the only approach that's available to us is twofold. One is organizing people at the grassroots level, empowering people to bring this message to others. I think media, grassroots media, can be very effective, of course, unless you get censored, then it becomes more difficult. But grassroots media can be a very powerful tool. So I think we need to creatively utilize media and organize people at the grassroots level to help make this change. The one thing that I don't understand, though, I'll just say this for a second here. I've never figured this out. A lot of times we talk about these forces as industries, but it's really people. It's just people. It's people in positions of power, whether it's someone in Washington or someone in a particular industry, who are making decisions, putting profits over people. And that's what I don't understand. I personally, I'll just relay a little story. I remember when I was young, my dad was getting a lot of flack from his peers, and much more so than the public understands. He went through so much hardship back then. And he came home one day, he just had it. He just said, I'm not sure I can do this anymore. How would you feel if we ended up moving to a trailer? We had a big family. And he was concerned about, well, how is he going to support the family? And of course, us 5 kids, I think at the time our cousin was living with us, we were just ecstatic because we thought we could all pile up in the same bedroom, and we just thought it would be like just a big party. So we said, yeah, go ahead, that'd be fine. But he was prepared to do that, and I felt that way my whole life as well. I would rather live in the most meager of circumstances and do the right thing than to hurt someone else. And I think ultimately, somehow, and I don't know how we do this, but the crisis that we have in our world, it's really more of a spiritual crisis. And when I say spiritual, I don't necessarily mean that you have to, be part of any particular organized religion. What you want to do in that regard is up to you. But I think we need to look out, we need to see our lives differently, understand who we truly are, why we're here, what we're meant to do, and just take a more spiritual view of things, because we have too many people who just make decisions that hurt other people for no reason other than money, it's not something we can take with us when we die.
Yeah. I think that's a really good point. And as we're closing on the end, I'm going to make just a quick shameless plug here, and by sharing my screen. And so for people who are interested in what we do, please follow us at Rock Life Med, either on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube, and LinkedIn. And once again, we do have these programs that are available to the public. We feel like one of our missions is to operationalize lifestyle medicine and plant-based nutrition. So we make it really easy for physicians to order these examinations, or sorry, I'm a radiologist, I blew it there. Not these examinations, these interventions for people. And now because of the miracle of Zoom, these are available to people all over the world. And so we have over 200 doctors around the country who have ordered or referred patients for our programs, including the Jumpstart program. And so we're just really proud of that. We also offer free CME to physicians and other healthcare professionals who go through these programs, because we really do want to get the message out. And we really feel like that's how we sort of the grassroots approach to it, is to start with doctors and also to get their patients interested. We have a number of patients who will say, well, my doctor, what do I do? My doctor's not interested in this. And we say, well, teach your doctor. Because there aren't that many Dr. Susans around. So Dr. Susan Friedman, we didn't get a chance to talk about what she does, but she has started a lifestyle medicine practice in Rochester as part of the university. So just really, proud of her for doing that. And I think that's how it's going to happen. It's going to be from the bottom up. So with that, I wanted to see if Nelson, if you have any final words for our audience before we sign off for the night.
Well, I would just say, what could I say that might be meaningful other than good night?
Yeah.
I would say, there's just so much negativity in the world today. Put some blinders on. Don't consume as much of that, and just focus on your own sphere of influence. What you can do in your life to take responsibility for life, what you can do to help others do the same. The people in your family, your friends, your coworkers, your community, and focus on that. And you'll get so much joy. It'll give you such a more optimistic attitude. Turn off the TV now and then. Don't. And I have to tell myself that. Kim tells me that all the time. Don't watch don't watch the news so much.
Right.
But just focus. Focus on what you can do with the people close to you.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you for those inspiring words, and thank you for the wonderful work you're doing with Plant Pure Communities, and your great original documentary and the current documentary, From Food to Freedom. We're just so excited about the work you're doing, and count you as a friend and a part of this movement together. And I just add that I understand the part about courage, because I feel like pretty much every morning you got to have courage just to get out of bed and do things that are outside your comfort zone. So once again, thanks a lot, Nelson Campbell, and thank you, Dr. Susan Friedman. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me, and you keep up the good work as well. Your group's doing some good things. Thank you
so much. Yeah. All right. Good night, everybody.